All righty. Okay, let's get started. We're going to be going over, we're going to be finishing up the project where we ended off with last week, and we'll do a quick kind of recap. Okay, let's do this. All right. Again, if you have any questions, drop it in the Q&A. And that will be the best way to make sure that I see it. Okay, class 11. Let's do it. Actually, so the first thing I wanted to do was kind of walk through a quick demonstration on like a cool color source. So here, let's go here. All right, so the first just cool place to get a color palette without having to think too much into it is a place called foundcolor.co, and I included a link in the Google Doc in the class folder. Class 11, there's a file called Notes and Links, and there's a link to this website and the other website I'm going to show you today. And most of everything we're going to talk about today, there's some kind of link that you could do your own research after class. So how does this website work? This is basically like a color inspiration website. So there's a bunch of images. It's not very complex, but it's cool. Let's select this image. And what this does is it, I'm not sure if this is automatically generated or like some software or someone does this manually, but they take a photo that has some nice color palettes and they break out, I'm assuming someone does this by hand. They give you the hex code, which is, we spoke about, it's a shorthand code usually used for web development, but it's pretty good for just using it on different computer programs. It's not good for getting accurate color in print, but it's pretty good for any other design. And they also have the RGB value if you wanted to put that in. But just copying the hex code and using it in Illustrator, and I didn't really think about it, but perhaps I can show it to you. Perhaps I can show you how to do that later. So this is just a really neat website, nice colors, right? I don't know, it's a good place to start from. Okay, so that's this, and I'll show you where you can paste your hex code. So you would select this code, and there's a pound sign right before it. That's how you know it's a hex code. You can right-click the copy or Control-C, and then I'll show you where to paste it once we're inside of Illustrator. Okay, so that's the first website. The second website, this is really meant for web design and app design, but I think that it's just a nice color generator or color palette generator, and it's really easy to use. And they also use hex codes here because that's how HTML and CSS uses color, like the main way, the simplest way. But there's a bunch of different palettes here, and you can select them. Selected one. And you have a bunch of different colors. And then when I select a color, it's basically like, it basically copies it, and then I can paste it into Illustrator. And again, I'm going to show you how to do that once I'm inside of Illustrator. a little bit later, but I just wanted to show you this website, really, really simple, that has some kind of color psychology, right? Arguably a legitimate rationale. So this is really great, and it even gives some suggestions of what you should be using the colors for within a website, and you can decide how you will transfer them into your design. So let's get started. Okay, so class 11. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about about 3 designers in this class, or this specific lecture, and I'm going to talk about a specific element of work, a specific piece of their work. So Paul Garbett is a designer in Australia. Really nice work. So he was invited to New Zealand, just 3 hours away from Australia. He was invited to New Zealand to give a talk about graphic design, about his business, about his career. And he thought it would be funny to kind of, and he wanted to make a poster about it, maybe to sell it or to advertise the event, the speaking event that he was participating in. And he wanted to play off the idea that New Zealand and Australia are so close to each other that it's like a ditch, right? It's like a 3-hour flight. We're not so close, but close enough. And so he thought it's okay, crossing the ditch and airplanes and kind of kicking around those different ideas, those different visual ideas. And he chanced upon this idea of a model toy airplane that he used to put together when he was a kid. And again, this is connected to the idea of taking a plane trip, a short plane trip across from Australia to New Zealand. So he's like, oh, those planes were kind of cool, and they came with these model plane kits came with these really cool stickers that after you built the plane, then you could put those stickers and customize your airplane. So he thought that was a great visual reference. So he's taking it a step kind of sideways. Instead of showing an airplane, he's using some of the details related to an airplane. So this is what he made. He kind of made a poster, a visual poster, meaning it's more focused on the graphics, and it just incorporates typography just a little bit. That kind of copy the flavor from the sticker packs and then translate it into a poster or a flyer for this event. And obviously it's focused on design. He's a designer. The talk is about design. So it was appropriate for the job and the client, right? We can think about some projects where this wouldn't be appropriate, but this was appropriate for this project. And the cool thing was that he printed it in a kind of material. So this is just a close-up, right? You can see the different elements, sticker pack, but he printed it in a kind of material that every single piece could be peeled off like a sticker. And so that's a really interesting and cool way to pull something he remembers from his childhood, pull it into a poster, and then add in that kind of element of that from the sticker pack from the model airplane that he was referencing. So I thought that was pretty cool. Okay, so everything could be peeled off. All right, so the next kind of poster series, or give me a second, was a work by Natasha Jenn. She still is a designer at a company called Pentagram. She was originally from Taiwan, and she did this project for something called the Heritage Ball. Now, the Heritage Ball is an annual event for, I believe it's the New York Architects Association or something like that. It was for architects, kind of an annual dinner. And so the whole like brand design, which she did, not brand, event design, was based on this font that she made. And it was like this very flexible font. And there's actually some animations online where these letters actually expand and contract. And the idea was that specifically in like urban environments or like cities like New York, where every single space is taken up by a building, and everything's maximized for space. So they created this font that maximizes space and expanded and contracted according to the space available on the surface of the poster, or piece of material. So you can see this is the invitation to the Heritage Ball, right? And this is what people would get in the mail. And it's kind of like a logo, but it's not. It's more than a logo. It could be used as a font. We can see how it extends to a brochure about the sponsors of the event, and it makes for a very simple but also very unique and original approach to designing a brochure or a simple event, a simple element for an event. Right. Okay, so now I wanted to talk again about the Colby Printing Company. I wrote printing press, but that's not what it was called. And we spoke about this either last class. I think we spoke about it last class, right? It's about this company that used something called letterpress printing. They used physical pieces of type, covered with ink, and then pressed it into paper to make these different kinds of posters. These different kinds of flyers, and they were very colorful and a little funky. And the reason was because they really just focused on getting the job done. They weren't really designers, so they used whatever they had around, or they used whatever made sense to them, and they put it in the flyer, and they put it out there, and they use these really bright colors to grab people's attention. So what we started doing last week was we started making a poster based on the phrase "think good and it will be good." And what I wanted to do was kind of capture some of the attitude or the visual flavor, right, from these Colby Printing Company posters, the color and some of the texture. So that's what I wanted to do today. Before we go on to the next step in that project, I wanted to first make sure that we're all on the same page before we move too quickly. So let me open up Illustrator. That's what I'm doing now, actually. All right. So we're going to open Illustrator, and we're opening that "think good and it'll be good." There we go. Let me see. Saved it. Yeah, all right. Okay, so this is the final product. Meaning, after this class, hopefully, this is what closely would have looked like for you. So I wanted to first see if it was necessary to go over a few steps with you guys, or if the majority of the class is ready to move forward, I'll walk us through that. And then if there are one or two people who could use a review, I can backpedal and, for their benefit, go over some material. So I'm going to take Just a few seconds. Okay, so some people ask me to review. I want to. Do you want me to just go over it quickly or step by step? Which one would be most beneficial? Please put your question in the Q&A. Okay, so it seems like the majority there are some people who would like me to do a step-by-step review, but for the benefit of the majority of the class, I'm going to go a step forward, and then I'm going to take some time, like basically introduce a new subject or new idea or new technique, and then while everyone else is playing around with it, we'll go over it step by step. So the first thing that we have to do is, okay. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to go to the Google Drive for class 11. And I'm going to paste that again into the chat. I shared it to panelists and all attendees. And okay. Okay, so I open it, I see class 11, and what I want us to do is we're going to download texture.png and just select it, right click, download. Simple as that. Right click and download. And I'm going to open up. I actually deleted. This is the. Just shift that over. So what we want to be working with right now is outlined text, which means that it's not a editable. It's no longer a font. It's a shape made up of points. Okay, and if you don't get one point, it's okay, because as long as you get the basics, you will understand some of the other points, and that's also really good. Just going to move that over just so we get consistent results. All right, move that over. Okay, great. So I have my outlines here. I'm going to select, let me lock my background. It is locked, great. I'm going to select all of my outlined type. I'm going to right click and I'm going to group it, or Control G. Okay, that's the first step. Then we're going to place our image, that texture.png image, we're going to place that into our Illustrator document, just like we placed other images. It is essentially an image file, and this is what you should see. I'm going to wait and see if people are able to see what I'm seeing, right? We want to see this is what we want to see. Okay. Okay, so is the majority of the class able to see the texture? I'm obviously going to go over this again a second time. New material. All right, so I placed this texture in, this image of a texture with some level of transparency. And what I want to do is I'm going to use a texture to knock out some of the color of my type to give it that distressed look, like it went through, like, you know, that it was printed with like physical materials. Someone asked if it matters which layer you put the image on. It doesn't matter. It matters that the image is on top of everything else. That actually matters for this kind of effect. And then I'm going to show you, I'm going to run through it. I feel like some things might be explained if I run through it. So I'm just going to walk through it a little quickly. So you don't need to follow along. Maybe just watch my screen. And then we'll go over it a second time. Okay. So I have this image. And what I'm going to do, is go to Window. I'm going to open the transparency window. Okay, Window, transparency. And this is actually important. I'm going to hit Control X on my keyboard. Again, no need to follow along step by step right now. I think best would be to just watch how I do this. So Control X. Yeah, okay, Control X. Select my grouped typography. So all my typography is grouped. I'm going to press Make Mask. When I press Make Mask, I see this black box over here up here. And then I'm going to press Control F. And there are kind of two different modes. It's kind of like a clipping mask that I'm basically a clipping mask that I'm making, but it's a little more advanced. So we have the container, which is my typography, and then the thing that my typography is holding or masking, which is my texture. And I'm going to check clip. I'm going to check invert mask. And then I'm going to kind of just pull certain parts of the image to where I want kind of like the fade to appear. And I'm going to go over this again. And I'm just pulling on it. I'm not holding shift because, okay. And then once I want to get out of it, I press on the typography. You see a little thin blue line appears outside of that. And this is what I'm left with. I can move it around, but it essentially functions like a clipping mask. The texture is being held within. Okay, so now I saw that there were a couple of raised hands. What I'm going to do is walk through this step by step. Again, I think let's first watch my screen, and maybe some of it maybe we'll remember some of it. And for the people who may have caught on, maybe try to mess around. Basically, maybe try to break the mask because I found that the way I learned Illustrator was pretty much just like trying and pressing anything and seeing what happens when I did that. And then if I didn't like what happened, I would just press Control Z, or if even that didn't work, I would just close down the project and maybe reopen another one. So while I walk through this, okay. So the first thing that we're doing, is we're going to the class 11 folder. I assume everyone's able to access it. I shared the link in the webinar chat and no one mentioned that they couldn't access it. So I assume that all 16 of you were able to access the class folder. Now, once I'm in there, I'll go to class notes. Again, I think people should, whoever wants a review, to watch my screen as I do it. I think some of it will come back. So just gonna copy exercise 1. That's what we're up to right now. Copy the text there. Okay, and I'm going to make a tabloid. That's what it's called. Tabloid artboard. Really just saved this from previously. Okay, so I have my text here and it's like default font, default everything. So what I want to do is last class we walked through downloading certain fonts. I could walk through that quickly, but I think we gave considerable amount of time to it. You know what? I'm just going to not go through it completely. Okay, so the typeface that we're using is called FF Good. Has a different name inside of Illustrator exactly. So I'm going to fonts.adobe.com and I'm searching FF space good. FF stands for the name of the company that designed this specific typeface. And there are a lot of typefaces here. And I'm going to download all of them. Just go to the toggles over here. You can see that I'm not signed in, and that's why it's asking me to sign in. If I was signed in, all I had to do was press these, and it would automatically, right? So it's asking me to sign in. It would automatically connect to my Illustrator. Okay, so once I've figured that out, we're going to use 2 fonts within the typeface. Okay, and you can see what I have here. These are both of the same typeface, but one is extended and one is compressed, right? So one is stretched out, not really. It has that appearance, and then one is very tall. So that's what I want to do next, and I'm going to kind of arrange it this specific way. Honestly, you don't have to do exactly what I'm doing. I'm doing it this way because I have to design an exercise that we could do in class. So I have to do it in a specific way. But if you want to try something else, go ahead and do that. If you want to use a different font, go ahead and do that. But I need to do it in a specific way, obviously. I'm not just making it up in class. So this is the way I chose to do it. It was my personal choice. And I'm using 2 fonts within the typeface. And within Illustrator, I don't know why, but it's called Good Pro. So with my text selected, I go to my characters panel. And of course, your right-hand panel could look different. I recently just kind of customized my tool panel. But if it looks different, it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't mean that your program is broken. All you have to do is pull up your character panel. That you can just press Control-T on your keyboard or go to Window, scroll down to Type, and make sure your character, right, this stands for character panel, is checked off. So by doing that, I'm going to go and type in Good Pro. We see that Good Pro comes up and a specific font of that typeface comes up. So I'm also going to make it all caps. We did this before. I'm going to go to the bottom left corner of my character panel, make everything all caps. Do optical alignment. Again, that's just me. It looks like there's an extra space at the bottom, so I'm going to remove that. Okay, so I'm going to make think this. I'm using extended ultra. So compressed would be the font, and then light through Ultra would be the weight. So it's hard to keep track. All right, again, extended, then Ultra, compressed light, compressed Ultra, extended Ultra. I'm using quite a few parts to this. Okay, and then what I did last class was I broke each of these pieces or words out into their own text box. I simply do that by pressing Control X and then Control V. Control V pastes things. Go through that again. Control X, Control V, Control X, Control V. It's a little tedious. Okay, so this is what we have here, and I feel like some of you can already catch on what happens next. So I'm going to take some time to make sure we're all in this together. Right, so when we do Control X, it's called cutting, but the way I would describe it is that it grabs an element. This is a computer thing, not an Illustrator thing. So when you press Control X, you're grabbing it, and then you can paste it somewhere else, but it will delete it from your original location. So it's like you're moving it almost. So it kind of removes a step of copying, pasting it, and then deleting it. Because if you hit Control X when you select an item, it's like you're moving it to the place you're pasting it to. And you can play around with it. Right, just hitting Control X, Control V on your keyboard. You'll see what happens when you do that. And then we undo things by Control Z, right? Control Z on your keyboard, or you can go to Edit, and then you can go to the top. It says Undo Move. That's the manual way to do it. Right, when you Control X, Control X, it's called cutting. That's not very descriptive for me. Okay, so then we scale it. Right? I'm holding Shift to kind of get that smooth transition. And, all right. Just the rough idea. Okay, so once we have our type, and it doesn't, at this point, it doesn't matter what it looks like. We already did this last class. So once we have our type, I'm going to select all of it, right click, and create outlines. You can also select your type and press Shift Control O, and that will also turn that into outlines. Again, outlines converts your font, which is basically a simple software, right? A font is a package software you can transfer from computer to computer, and you're turning it into a vector. That's what happens when you create outlines. And we want to create outlines to add this texture. Just think. Also, I wanted to introduce the idea of creating outlines. There are ways to add texture to text that's live, which is another way. Live text is text that isn't turned into a vector yet, right? So this is live text that I typed out, and then I can edit the font and all this kind of stuff in the character panel. But when I create it to outlines, that's no longer possible. And now it's a vector. Okay, so with my text selected, I'm going to File, Place, Texture PNG. Click and drag to place it. Then Control X again, right? We have Control X again. That's important because Control X is grabbing it, and then we want to paste it in the same place once we make our mask. So, ooh, that was a mistake. I need to group it first. Selecting all my text, right-clicking, group, and make mask. And then you can go to edit, paste in front. Okay, and I'm going to make sure that the clip box is checked and the invert mask is checked. Then I can just pull the edges of my kind of weathered image to get the texture that I want. All right, so that's a simple way of adding texture. Okay. I see someone raising their hand. I'm not going to answer that now, but I will answer it. So please hold on to the question. Okay, so are there any specific things I could go over before we move on? So how did I make the ends of the word more textured? So still inside of my mask, I moved my image around, and the edges of my image is more distressed than the center. So if I zoom in, we can see that there still is that kind of grainy texture, but the edges of it is more textured. So all I'm doing is like adjusting the photo of that texture inside of my type. And then when I'm done, I have to navigate out of my clipping mask, and I do that by clicking the container of my clipping mask. So let's do that again. All right, so we have outlined my outline typography, and we have it all grouped. That's kind of important. Everything that you want with the same texture has to be grouped so it's treated as a singular object. Okay, and we group it by selecting everything, right-clicking to group, or Control G. And then we're going to place our texture in. Texture.png. We downloaded that from the folder. And I'm just going to place it on top of my text. Okay. Place on top of my text. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a, wonder if there's, I don't know if there's a manual way to do this. I don't think so. All right. So just bear with me. I'm going to press Control X. All right, Control X. That just grabbed my item, the element that I was selecting. Now the next step, I'm going to select what I want to be the container of my texture, which is my grouped and outlined typography. Okay, and then I want to have my transparency window open. So if you don't have it open, go to Window and make sure the transparency window has a little blue check mark next to it. Okay, and that's what this is right here. That's what this is. So we have two boxes. The first box is my container, is my typography in this instance. And the second box is going to be where my texture or my content lives inside of once I make that mask. So the first step I'm going to do in this process is with my grouped typography selected, I'm going to press Make Mask, okay? And now what we can see is that I'm inside of my, and the blue line tells you where you are basically. Are you selecting the container or the stuff that's inside of the container, the thing that you are masking? So the way I have these two boxes, one's black and one is my typography, although it's invisible over here, but that's totally fine. That's because I'm inside of my mask right now. So it's not showing it to me. So inside this black box, now I'm going to press Control F or go to Edit, Paste in Front, okay? And now we can see a little bit of an outline of my mask, but I'm still inside of like the content mode. Okay. So, and again, these two boxes, this box, the box on the left represents the mask. The box on the right represents the content of the mask. I'm going to select Invert Mask. I found that that's what works specifically for this texture. It didn't work for me initially, and I kind of just had to play around with it and see, you know, what options work best. So for this texture with this typography, this works best. So I have clip checked off, invert checked off, and then when I select the left box again, I am now outside of my mask, which means I can move my mask around without moving around the content. Now, what if I wanted to move around my texture inside of my mask? I just have to select that black box again, which represents the content of my mask. And you can see that I am moving it around, right? And it's acting as the fill of my mask. Okay? So it's not a science. And then the way I'm adding texture is because the edges of my photograph have more texture than the center of it. So I'm just pulling in my edges by hovering over the side over here, and pulling it towards the direction I want it to be in. All right. Someone's typing in all caps. Is that because you're really frustrated? Or are you really excited? Okay. I'll be happy to go over this towards the end of class. Right now, I want to move on for the sake of the majority. We'll move on, but I'm be happy to go over it later. All right. Okay. Okay, so we're still on the topic of posters. That's what our heads are in right now. That's the game. Posters, flyers, I'm using the word interchangeably. I don't really see a difference, at least practically. Okay, so now we're going to talk about a specific series of posters. Well, a long series of posters, almost 20 years worth of posters by someone named Michael Beirut. And he's a designer. He's also a designer in Pentagram, the same company that Natasha Jenn is a designer in or a part of. And right, the architecture, the stretchy typography. So they work in the same company. And he, since 1998, he's been making posters for Yale University for their School of Architecture. And the poster the posters would promote, right? The posters could be for anything, lectures or exhibition or like meetings. So it could be anything, but he was their guy. He made all of their posters. And the parameters of the posters were really, really simple. Let me turn this on. The parameters of the poster were really simple. Yet, even though they were simple, they gave him the ability, or him and his team, the ability to make many different variations, right? So different flavors, even though you're using some very basic ingredients, but the way you mix it up will change the flavor. So it had to be using typography. It had to be in black and white. And it had to have a Y with a circle in it. The Y standing for Yale. Okay, so let's walk through a couple of, well, this one specifically, this is called Catastrophe Consequence, right? And we see consequence is the reaction to something that we do, not necessarily good, just the response to it, like ripples in the water. The ripples are the consequence of you throwing a pebble in the water. So we can see that they've used typography to suggest that kind of ripple effect of consequence. And they're talking about the catastrophe and consequence. So the bad consequences that happen. And again, we see the Y in a circle. Then we have, I can't actually read this. Then we have this really, really interesting typeface. It's called Meowstrom, I think. I'm not sure what this is for. And there were a lot of posters that they made. This is an open house for the Yale School of Architecture. Again, all the same organization, using the same basic ingredients, but many, many different flavors. Okay. Then the Y in the circle, but other than that, a very different flavor than these two. And then here's another example. They're using typography, but this is not really letters, but it's still, a lot of fonts come with these. They're called, they're just called glyphs, really. Or as far as I know, that's what they're called. They're called glyphs. It's kind of extra elements that sometimes fonts include, arrows, different kind of things. And again, we have a Y in a circle. Okay, and then two more. Here, that's a little more obvious. There's a bunch of Ys. I can't really read what's in the circle. But again, a different flavor. And then finally, another flavor, again, only using typography, no illustration, no photographs. And then we have the Y in a circle. So we have black and white. All the posters are exactly the same size. So they are the same size. They're using a clear grid, right? You can see the typography. The main pieces of information are fairly organized. But each poster has many, many different flavors. I think that's really interesting how we did that. Okay. Okay, so next, this is kind of like an introduction to the next exercise that we're going to do. And I was inspired to do this exercise by, or more like the style of the exercise, by a designer named Damien Conrad. And he designed this restaurant. Well, these are two different restaurants, but the design that I was inspired by was for a restaurant in Switzerland. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And, you know, I was looking at Michael Beirut's posters, the black and white, and I wanted to kind of work within those boundaries. So the next exercise kind of references that. So without further ado, we're going to go back into Illustrator. Let's see that open. Okay. And okay, so this is hopefully what we are going to somewhat be able to do today. Again, typographic, black and white. We're not only using typography here, we're using a little bit of a radial gradient, and hopefully we'll cover that today. And then we're using some very basic strokes, right? Just white lines to kind of create this. It looks a little dated, but honestly, but I wanted to go over some of the techniques used to do this. So that's why I did it. And why is it showing me that? That's really annoying. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to open our Google Drive again. And open a Google Drive. And we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to copy paste. Going to copy paste the text to exercise 2. Right, Control C to do that, or right click, copy. We can see the shortcut is right next to the manual function, Control C. And we're going to go into Illustrator. We're going to make a letter size artboard. Okay, letter size is the name of the game. Since I'm already in here, I'm going to do that. Change the orientation. All right, great. And Control V to paste my text. The Google Drive is in the chat, is in the Zoom webinar chat. And we're copying the text for exercise 2. Okay, so we're going to go to notes and links. And then under notes, exercise 2, we're just going to copy all of that text into Illustrator. If you guys have a better idea or a better way that I can organize this, so this could be a lot more obvious, let me know. But this seems to be kind of straightforward to me. So yeah, feel free to let me know how you think I can improve this. Okay, so now I know that either some people don't really like, I don't know why, like downloading fonts from like using fonts from Adobe. I think it's awesome. It comes with your Adobe Illustrator membership. You get these fonts that would cost money if you didn't have Adobe. So take advantage of it. And it's like, I don't know, like if you follow along, you're going to learn how to use Adobe's font library, and that's like a really big asset. But if you don't want to, that's totally fine. Totally fine. But if you want to, then what you should do is within the class 11 notes and links Google Doc, there are going to be 2 fonts. I guess I could have titled this a little bit better, but you're going to go to click that, Meno Banner, and Commuter Sans. Okay, 2 other typefaces. Now I'm not logged in, and I'm not going to log in, but what you want to download, it's not really downloading. It doesn't store it on your computer. It stores it on a cloud, which does mean that if you close your membership with Adobe, you will lose access to these fonts, but kind of obvious. Okay, so you just want the first one. You don't want Meno Banner Extra Condensed. You could totally activate them, but we're not going to use it, or I'm not going to use it. So that's on you. We're just going to have Meno. We're just going to activate Meno Banner, and you do that by just clicking this little toggle once you're logged in. Again, I'm not signed in. I'm not signed in, but you should sign in with your account. And then we're going to also activate commuter sans. Now, if you don't want to, that's totally fine. You can use another font typeface to replace it. So we're going to use these two typefaces in this project. A lot of stuff going on over here. Okay, fair enough. Okay, lots of steps. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to recreate flyer on the left, okay? And I'm going to leave out the gradient and anything else. We're going to focus on the typography, and we're going to focus on giving things different typefaces and different weights. All right. Now, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom in, and what I do when I get a block of text that I need to use for a flyer is I first break up the information based on what I understand is the most important. Right? There's no, I wouldn't say there's an objective way, but there's kind of like a way you can think through it. So it's like, what's the most important thing people need to know? Okay, and then someone asked what fonts they should download. I'm going to include the link in the chat. Okay, so two links to both fonts are included in the Zoom webinar chat. All right. So this is how I broke up the information, and this is what made sense to me. And I'm just breaking it up by hitting enter. Everything's within a single text box. I'm going to put the time on its own line because that's usually very important kind of call out that people need to know. What time is it going to be at? Putting the date on its own thing. Right, the Baruch Hashem is going to be, it's important, but it's not something that people really need to see. It kind of just needs to be there. So it gets to be on its own line. And you know, we're going to see as we make things different sizes that some things are going to pop out a lot more and some things are kind of going to fall to the background. And I forgot how I did this. Now, I'm just going to use a / over here. Okay, I'm putting the ticket sales all at the same line. I think that's a very equal piece of information. So once I have all of the text broken up in a way that makes sense to me, and I would actually do this in like a Google Doc or a text editing document, I wouldn't actually do this, or I might do it in Illustrator, but I usually like to think through it in like just a Word-based document. In a lot of ways, this is kind of like the just deciding what pieces get grouped together and what pieces of information don't is a big part of the design. Like to me, this is already somewhat clearer than before. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make everything capitals. That's actually not the best thing for legibility, but I'm going to do that anyhow in this project. Meaning, generally, it's easier for people to read lowercase, but for right now, I'm going to make everything uppercase. And then I'll change it later. You can see that we changed the title and the artist name to lowercase, but I'm going to change that later. And then I'm also going to, I'm going to go with my text box selected. And I made it all uppercase by going to my character panel and going to the bottom left, and there are these two T's next to each other. And when I hover over, it says all caps. Click that, makes everything uppercase or caps. Okay, so then with my text box selected, I'm going to center all of my text, right? So we learned how to flush left our text. Now we're going to center it, and that's going to be at the top, kind of towards the right part of your screen. There's a button that says Align Center, right? Actually going to break that down. Subculture is the name of the venue. And so I'm going to break that out. Someone said they're not able to see the ability to add caps. So go to the hamburger menu. This is kind of a feature in all of Illustrator's windows, is that sometimes it hides some of the options in the window. And the way to reveal more of those options is by going to the little 3 horizontal bars at the top right of that window. And we can see that I have it here. In web design, it's called a hamburger menu. And it gives you a bunch of options, and you just select Show Options. And then it will show the complete set of options within that window. All right, so the next kind of step to editing our text is I'm going to set everything in commuter sans. And the reason I'm doing that is because that's going to be the majority of my text is going to be set in commuter sans. That's the typeface that I just downloaded or activated through Adobe. So I'm going to go commuter sans and let's just give it regular weight. All right, so now that's what we have here. All right. Kind of want to make sure it's really similar. All right, okay, good. Now, what I'm using these serif fonts, so commuter sans, right? Go over our typography definitions a little bit. This is a sans serif, and it's a little bit wider than a regular typeface. And to me, it has a little more of an elegant, delicate feel. And let's go over, someone asked a question, how do we align to center, right? We select our text box. We go to the top right area. And we did this before. The same way we left align, we align center is this little section right here. That's the best I could navigate. Okay, so now within our text box, we're going to make some edits to the, we're going to select Levy Robin. Okay, I'm going to select Levy Robin, and I'm going to set that in meno banner. So I can change typefaces of a specific, I could change the typeface of a few words within a text box just by selecting it. So, and just dragging over it or double clicking on that row of words. And I'm also going to do that here to the title of the event called Where Night Meets Day, meno banner. And I'm going to set it in black. Maybe that's too intense. Just set it in extra bold. Right, black is in this typeface, it's the heaviest, darkest weight, black. But bold is the weight, a less dark. I'm also going to turn off the caps. Again, that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put where night is one line and meets day is another. And okay, good. We're getting somewhere. Now, I'm also going to make those two titles that I edited, I'm going to make them much bigger. So within the character panel, I'm going to go to the text sizes, and I'm going to make it 48 points. Okay. Okay, good. So that's what we have going on over here. And we can also see that the default leading, and we spoke about leading, it's the spacing between lines within our text box is a little bit all over the place. And here it's a lot more even. So I'm going to show you, I don't know if it's complex, but it takes a little bit of finesse and tweaking to be able to get it to do what you want it to do. So I'm going to show you how to adjust leading in between two specific pieces of type, right? So not in the whole text box, which the way we would adjust the leading of an entire text box is selecting the entire text box. And also, if everyone can hold their attention to looking at my screen so that you can learn the location of the leading setting really, really easily. All right, so with my text box open, well, with my character panel open and my text box is selected, this little area, the right area where there are two A's and like a double arrow, is my leading. And we can see that as I kind of hover through the different settings, it's removing and adding leading in between lines. Okay. Now, how do I adjust the leading in between only two lines of type? So the way I do it. That's the question. All right, I select my line. Someone asked me to go over it again. I select my text box, and then in my character panel, we see two A's stacked on top of each other, and that is the symbol for the leading. The leading is another word for the space in between lines of type. And then, well, that's really it. I can set a custom. I can set a custom amount. Okay. Or I can use some of the presets that Illustrator provides. So the way I adjust leading in between two lines of type is I select the two lines that I want to adjust the leading in between of. Okay, so I'm selecting the top and the bottom, and I'm deciding how much space do I want to sandwich between those two lines of type. That's a good way to think about it. Pieces of bread. Okay, we have the top line and the bottom, and I want to select both. Just drag. And then using my arrows, I'm removing space in between lines of type. Can we see that? Let's go over that again. Let's say I want to change the amount of space between these two lines of type. So I drag over them, clicking and dragging till that's selected. Then going to my leading settings in my character panel and adjusting with my arrows the amount of space in between. That's a little tight. In between my, even that's a little tight, but whatever. And we get our character panel by going to Window, going to Type, making sure the character has checked off, and then it should appear on your right-hand panel, or pressing Control T. And I'll pull that up. Okay. So we could just do that. It can definitely be a lot more. Ooh, that's not what I want to happen. Okay. Okay, lots of weird spacing going on. Let me put that on auto. Okay, so for now, this is how I'm going to keep it. And let me see something. Okay, so just for mimic that, I'm going to keep it like that, I guess. All right, and then I'm going to just scale everything up a little bit. I'm going to tighten the space between type. I added, okay. Now let's learn, someone asked, how do we add a gradient? So let me introduce you to another part of the gradient tool. So there is, let's first make a black box. I'm going to hit M on my keyboard, drag across the wide expanse of my artboard, and I made a black box. And then I'm going to go, I could go to, how do I do this? Right click, arrange, send to back. So it doesn't look like anything happened because my type is black and my background is black. But I now I brought my type to the front, and just select that, make it white. Okay, so right, made a black box, just dragging over it, clicked M, black box, and then what happened was my black box, it's new content, and the new content appears on top. So I select my box, I go to arrange, and go to send to back. So I have my text, it's all a little smushed together. Okay, and what I'm going to do is, I don't want to do that. I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, it's really subtle, but I'm going to show you how to make an effect like this to have this kind of like little bit of light flare to make our black background a little less flat. So the way we do this is we select our background and should have done the new file. I'm going to add a gradient. Okay. The way we add a gradient is we go to the left-hand panel, we go to the stroke and fill area, and it's a little difficult because our colors kind of blend in, but we have to the left, to the far left is our solid fill, to the far right is the option to remove a fill, that's the red slash. Then in the middle, we have, if you hover over it, just leave your mouse over it, a little title will come up and it says gradient. Okay. Now, you're not going to be seeing, let me change that. Okay. This is what you probably see. Okay. And the way I changed the color of my text is I simply selected it, went to the swatches panel, and selected white, just like I would a rectangle or a solid shape. Okay, so now I have this colored I have this gradient and perhaps it looks cool to you. Perhaps this is where you want to stop, but no, this is not where we're going to stop. So I already see my gradient window, which happens when I add a gradient to something. And let's turn our attention to the section. No. Let's turn to our attention to the type area. It says type, and there are 3 boxes. So the first is called linear gradient. Linear gradient has a linear element to it. I don't feel the inclination to explain anymore. We can see there's kind of a line, right? We have white over here, black over here, and it's transitioning like that. And then in the middle, we have something called a radial gradient. A radial gradient could also be, let's call it a circle gradient. And that is when the gradient transitions from a center point. So let's select that. And all of a sudden we can see, right, we have white in the center, or perhaps for you it's a little different, black in the center transitioning to white. Okay. I'm going to pause and I'm going to make sure that we're all playing around with the radial gradient or a gradient right now. If you didn't understand something we went on before, leave that alone for now. We're definitely going to go over this. We're going to finish this up next week, and we'll have time to go over certain points. But right now, let's look at the gradient and learn something new about the gradient tool. Okay, so I have a black background. I added a gradient, and then I changed it from a linear gradient to a radial gradient. Okay. Does anyone have anything they need help with specifically? Okay, so now how did so what did I do over here? Okay, what's happening over here is I moved the point of my gradient from the center to the edge. That's simply what I did. And if you're still seeing linear, it's you have to change the setting from a linear to a radial. So you have to go to the gradient panel, and you're going to see something that says type. And then next to type, it basically says this is the type of gradient you're using. So one is linear, the center is radial, and the third is freeform, which is a whole different animal. Don't click that. Or you could play around. Who cares? It's fun. But we're going to be using radial. So that's what I want you to select within the gradient window panel. Okay, so how do we adjust the point of our gradient from our center of our object or shape to the edge for a more subtle, interesting effect? So that's really simple. What I want you to do with your object, with your gradient object selected, is press G on your keyboard. Okay? Just the letter G with your object with a gradient selected. All right, and what we see is the ability to edit the point of my gradient. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the point of my gradient actually outside of my shape. I know I did that too fast. Press G on my keyboard, okay? And basically, wherever I click, that's where the point of my gradient will be set. It looks kind of like stage lights. But to have this kind of very subtle effect, I'm actually going to click outside and then drag in. I want to make sure we go over that. Someone asked, how do I make the letters white? I selected my text box, I went to the swatches panel and I clicked white. Okay, so let's go over that one more time. I press G on my keyboard. G is kind of like the freeform edit your gradient tool. I shouldn't call it that because there's actually a freeform gradient tool. It allows me to adjust specific elements of my gradient. And what I'm going to do, so basically wherever I click, that's where the center of my gradient is set. And what I want to do is I only want to have the edge of my gradient inside of my object. And I want the main point of my gradient, the main part of that white circle, to be outside. And what does that mean? What does that look like? It means that I will, and if turn your attention to my screen, you'll see what I'm doing. I'm clicking outside and I'm dragging out, making my gradient bigger until I have like a little bit of an edge like that. All right, so should I go over that again? Put that in the question and answer window. Okay, great. I'm definitely going to go over it and go over it again before the end of class. But now let's let us. Oh, this is frustrating. I keep on having to move in between different screens. Okay, so one more interesting lecture, and then we'll go over any specific elements, and then we'll go over this again next week. Okay, so let me introduce you to the work of a graphic designer named Matt Willey, and Matt Willey does editorial design. We spoke about editorial design being the design of printed materials like magazines or newsletters or newspapers, that kind of stuff. And it can really range. It can be a lot of text, could be a lot of imagery. It really depends on the kind of publication that you're working on. But Matt Willey has worked on a ton of different publications, and specifically, like he's actually started a couple of his own magazines as a designer, and he has worked for the New York Times Magazine as the creative director. So I'm going to walk through three different kind of interesting issues and different issues of the magazine that he worked with, and like the unique design approach taken for that specific issue based on the concept, based on the content. So the first was called the 800-foot issue. And it was, when I say issue, I don't mean problem. I mean like, how do I describe it? Like that weekly magazine or that weekly publication. So the first one was called, not the first one, but the one we're going to be talking about is called the 800-foot issue. And the 800-foot issue talks about life above 800 feet. And it talks about how there are these super tall buildings in New York, and people live there in office buildings, and everything around it, like what it's like to live in a really tall building, like a really, really tall building, what it's like to work on them, what it's like to build them. And so normally a magazine is in this kind of orientation, right? Portrait, right? You have the long side going top to bottom. But for this magazine, they turned it sideways to kind of be able to illustrate the height of what they were talking about. And they also designed this custom fonts, and we can see this up over here, this custom font, so that the designers who were working on the issue were able to expand and contract the typography to fill the space, kind of like, again, like a little bit like the Heritage Ball invitation, where the buildings of New York kind of just take up all the space available, okay? And we can see these very vertical, everything is very, very vertical. Vertical typography, very tall, kind of like the buildings that we're talking about. Vertical imagery. And this was the cover, right? So you actually were able to open it up and you were able to see someone. I'm not really sure what they're doing there, but it looks really freaky. And here was an example of how the content of the story guided the entire design, even to the orientation of the magazine. So the next issue we're going to talk about is the Olympic issue. And this issue covered the Winter Olympics, and there are 15 sports in the Winter Olympics. And the issue covered the athletes and the sports, and they all had long articles involved in it. And Matt Willey, the designer, talks about how there was so much information that there wasn't really room to have any extra design, right? There was so much words and so many photos that they had to include. There wasn't a lot of room to design. So he had to come up with a way to make the magazine look interesting and unique, and I guess added some flair, but in a very limited space. So he designed this typeface, which might give you a headache, but we'll see how it's used, right? So this is a very wide, a lot of thick and thins. And this is how it was used, right? So the letters would stack, and this way he was able to not use up a lot of space for the titles, but also just have a very creative and unique way to go about it. And I think it looks really good in this kind of usage, the way it's used here. I feel like this is a little hard to read, but I also think it's really interesting and kind of cool to look at. Okay, so the final issue that we're going to cover is called Fractured Lands. So the entire magazine, usually a magazine is a bunch of different stories. So this entire magazine was covered a single story dedicated to a really long story with a lot of photos and a lot of backstory. And it was about the recent history and the war and the unrest in the Arab lands in the Middle East. So I believe it was covering a whole bunch of different countries, interviewing a whole bunch of different people, a whole bunch of different families. So this is the cover of that magazine, and it already is an indication of what's going to be inside. It's very minimalist. We see the title of the story here and a brief little blurb about it, who wrote the story and the photo, who's the photographer, and then we just have this very powerful image taking over the cover. And we have a preface, and we can see that based on, in contrast to the other two issues, let me just quickly toggle through that, right? Where there's a lot of content, extra content, this is very pared back. And the idea was that they wanted the story to speak for itself. They didn't really want to design it too much. They wanted the story and the words and the details to come through. Here's they stuck with a black and white theme, and they really just they made sure to illustrate the story in a way that people would understand it best and otherwise take a step back. This was the back, and I don't know if this was the back, this was one of the pages, right? The title of the image, and then the image itself. And I think this is really interesting, an interesting thing to do Because sometimes you would think that if you had a very powerful or sad story or tragic story, you would want to illustrate it with lots of stuff that makes people feel tragic or makes people feel sad. But sometimes we have to acknowledge that design has certain limitations and that we should really sometimes just let the thing that we're trying to make most important be the most important. Okay, and to me, that was this kind of example is that, make sure everything's clean and usable. And sometimes that's all you need to do, and let the information literally speak for itself. Okay, so back to this. I want to make sure see the right thing. Okay, good. I want to take the time. So I want to take the time to go over any questions people had. We're going to finish this up. We're going to finish this up on Thursday. So I wanted to go over any questions people had, and you can put it in the chat. You can put it in the question and answer if you'd like. I'll go over anything you want me to. Okay. I'm going to
Yes, okay, hello.
Hi, you had a question?
Yeah, okay. I mean, basically, I'm fine with tonight, whatever you taught. I just have a problem, and I'm wondering if it's, I don't know how to do with this. I don't know how to download this Google Drive. Now, I know that you've showed it to me many times, but I really think, I don't know, unless I'm supposed to be buying something or downloading Google Drive or something is wrong. I try to follow your steps, it doesn't happen.
So you want to do it right now?
Okay, fine. So 1 second, let me get again your chat. Hold on.
Okay. The beauty of a Google Drive is it's called it's like a cloud-based storage. So it's stored on the internet. It's not stored on your computer. So when you download specific files, you're downloading it off of the internet, right? It's almost like Google has provided their own hard drive for us to use.
So like as soon as I open up this thing that you sent, it tells me on the bottom, try Drive for free. Google Drive is a safe place for all your files. Get started today. Am I supposed to open that?
No, I mean, I don't see that.
No.
That doesn't sound like something that you need to click. Are you able to access other things?
Such as?
Are you able to select items within the folder?
Yeah, so let's say if I want to go to class 11.
Yeah.
So let's say this thing, the, Baruch Hashem, whatever, Levi, whatever, right? That thing that we were doing tonight.
Sure.
So go over it and it kind of like, highlights itself.
Good.
And what do I do?
Okay, so what we want to do is we want to copy it into Illustrator. We want to copy paste it into Illustrator. So we highlight it, and then you could right click.
So when I right click, nothing happens. That's what I'm saying. Something is wrong.
That is true. Something is wrong. A couple of things.
Or if I go, like if I actually like left click on it, right? Then it just opens up the whole page for me. Then you know what I'm saying? And that's not what you want, right?
I'm confused. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so Are you trying to download this file or are you clicking into it?
Well, what do you want me to do? That's my question.
I'm sorry. Let's go to the image. We went over downloading the image last week.
So first of all, I have a different type. I mean, but you told me it's just the way that you chose. You have it like on a linear basis. I have little boxes.
Yeah, that's just the preference.
Doesn't matter.
Right, I can toggle between that if I want. Okay. I prefer this.
Okay. How do you change it?
The top in the corner, there's going to be, if you look at my screen, you'll see that next to the kind of the eye, there's a grid. Well, that's what I see because I'm the inverse of what you have. But basically these options to toggle between the grid and list view is right here. You see that?
So actually I do, let me just see. Okay, list view, okay, yeah. Right, okay, now I changed it, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so then let's say we want to copy paste some text from my document on Google into Illustrator. So to open it, I just have to double click. Just like 2 taps or 2 clicks.
With the left click.
Yeah, right. So that when we double click with the left, on a left click, it opens an item. And then we could, let's just select all of the content that we want to copy right now. And we don't want to copy anything else. And
then you copy and paste. Is that what you do?
That's right.
Okay. But let's say the other thing, the one that, you know, this is easy, but let's say that other thing, that black, you know, that black thing that you were showing before, the first thing that you did today. What was it called? You know,
gradient.
What?
The texture.
Texture PNG.
Uh-huh.
What do you do with that?
You want me to walk through? You want me to walk through that?
Yes. So how did you get that over to Illustrator?
So the first thing we do, is we go to texture.png, and we right-click again to show up our options, right? And Google asks what we want to do. So I'm just going to select download, right? Do you see this list of options?
So again, I have a problem. When I right-click, this does not happen.
Okay, so I mean, I'm not a computer whiz, but what I found is that as long as you select it, right next to the grid view, to the left of the list view and the grid view option toggle, there are these 3, I forgot what they're called. These 3 dots indicate a kind of menu that you could access. So if I click on those dots, a little menu opens up. And I'm presented with a download option.
Okay. Okay, I see the download option.
Great. So just click that.
Okay.
Now, when you open Illustrator, we're going to go to Place, right? File.
One second, let me go back to my Illustrator now. Okay.
File.
Okay, so you're going to Place and File.
Right.
Okay.
And then I'm going to go to my Downloads folder. That's where again, I'm not sure where files go on your computer.
Right.
I don't have that insight, but my files get saved to the Downloads folder, texture.png. and then I just click place. And now, if you bring your attention to my screen.
So then I just press place, yeah? Okay. Well,
Press place. Well, there's one more step.
okay.
Now,
I put in file name or anything?
no, just select it. You just have to click on it and then place.
And then place, okay.
Yeah. Now, look at my screen for a second. Do you see my cursor is kind of, it has these like little, it has like a 1/1, and it has this, right? Is this what you're seeing?
Let me see a second. Again, where's your cursor?
Right here. Move that over. Right here, in the center.
Oh, no, I don't see where you are. I'm sorry. Where?
Right here.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So then I'm just going to click and drag to place. And I'm going to be thoughtful about, meaning I'm deciding how big I want my placed image. So I'm going to drag, and then when I let go, it's now placed.
Okay, but actually I'm not seeing anything. I'm just seeing your Google Drive. I'm not seeing what you're doing. You're not screen sharing. I just see Google Drive.
What about right now?
Okay, now I see it. Okay, so now
Okay.
what you're doing. Okay, now I see your cursor. I didn't see it before. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize. Sorry
Okay.
about that. Let's go with that one more time. And clicking and dragging, but I'm letting go.
So, okay, so again, so you opened up a place, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then what do you do first? You click by file over there, you click place, or you first drag, you open up over here like in Adobe, in Illustrator or something? Like you just did something now.
Oh, well, right, because I might have slightly different ways of doing it the way you would, but I'm going to go to File, I'm going to go to Place, select the image, and now Illustrator is telling me that I have an image kind of loaded, and then I'm going to place it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see.
That makes sense. Someone asked me to go over the radial gradient, so I wanted to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go over the radial gradient one more time. And someone else mentioned about, is there class on Thursday? I know this will seem really bad, but I don't know. I'm going to double check that email, just like you did, Abigail. And I don't know, maybe we can do that right now. Nah, I'm not going to do it right now. If there is no class, as according to the email, then there's no class. And all right, so okay, I made let's start with a black square. I got a black square and I made it black by opening the swatches panel, toggling the colors. You can also make this radial gradient with any color, but right now, keep it simple. All right, so first we're going to make it into a gradient. The way I'm going to make it into a gradient is by going to the bottom left panel by the tools and stroke area. And yeah, someone just posted the dates of the class. Thank you, Rena. It says from December 8th to December 22nd. So that's our answer. The next class will be December 22nd, which let me double check what exactly that is. Whoa, that is a long time. The next class is going to be the Tuesday after Hanukkah. I don't know. I disagree. I disagree with that decision, but okay. Well, I guess you guys probably have a lot going on over Hanukkah. Okay, so I have a black square, and I'm going to add a gradient to it. All right. The way I add a gradient: bottom left area. Maybe I should use some different shapes, different colors, just to completely illustrate it. Okay. There's so much going on here. All right, I'm going to add a gradient by going to the left area, and there's this. The middle box is a gradient. I made it black by going to the swatches. Wait, someone asked, how do I make it black? How do I make what black? Black, okay. Standard. How do I make my background black? Are you asking how do I, someone asked, how do I make the background black? Do you ask me how do I change a color of a shape? I'm a little confused. All right, I'm going to go over this. Okay, so within a gradient, there's two basic different kinds of gradients. There's linear and radial. Linear is that it moves from side to side of the side to side, and radial is that it changes from a specific point to the edge. Again, someone asked, how do you make the square black? Open your swatches panel, and with your shape selected, select black. Does that answer your question? If that didn't work, I'm not sure what the problem is. Make a new square. Make it black again. Maybe open a new project. Perhaps there's something within the project that you're working in that doesn't allow you to do that. So to quickly go over the last 5 minutes and go over the radial gradient. So we're going to go to the gradient window, type, and we're going to go to the middle option of the 3 different types of gradients, radial gradient. Okay, so that's the most important thing. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if yours looks a little different. If it looks this, I'm toggling between the center of my gradient. I'm swapping it back and forth. I think it would be wise to bring your attention to my screen if you wanted to see the exact steps. Okay, so we have a linear gradient, and then I'm going to press G. When I press G, this is what I see when I press G. I have a bar, and I have this dotted line, and this is basically telling me how wide my gradient is going to be. And how wide my gradient is going to be. And it also allows me to change the starting point of my gradient, okay? And the way I make this effect, or the way I made this effect, is I actually set the point of my gradient outside of my shape by clicking. And then I dragged out, kind of like I was making a circle. And it would be the same with any other color. A gradient is not dependent on a color as long as you have two different colors, even if they're extremely similar. The only way you can't make a gradient is if you have the same color, right? Because a gradient suggests what would be the word? Transition between two different colors, two different values. And then we're just playing around with that. But it wouldn't make a difference what color you use. Okay, so I expect that to be not the most simple. So I want to know if some people understood that and some people would like me to go over that again. Right, so essentially it's not off the page, but it's off of the shape. Right, we can see that I'm not gonna let go right now, but we can see that the point of my gradient is outside of my shape. And then I'm kind of expanding the radius of my gradient and I'm bringing it, pulling that into my shape. And the way I'm doing this, by the way, is I'm holding down on my the left part of my mouse, and I'm dragging towards where I want my gradient to expand to, okay? So it's very similar to working with another shape. We're clicking, and then we're dragging, and then we're letting go when we like what it looks like. And I'm pressing Control Z to just go over that a bunch of times, and you can let go and then press G again and edit it and let go, click out of it. Oh, you know, I don't really like that. Press G on your keyboard again, over that again. The longhand way to do that is you can go to your left hand toolbar, and it's difficult to describe what it looks like. It looks kind of like a gradient. You hover over it and it says gradient tool, and it'll pull up the same option. Right, and we can do that a bunch of times.
Yes, I'm sorry, back to the Google Drive again. If I want to access it once the class is over, like the practice to do what you just said, where is it? Where do I find it?
The link is in the Zoom webinar chat.
We close it, then what happens, you know, once we close it tonight? So where do I find it?
That's a great question. I can show you how to bookmark a page on your browser so that your browser will save the link, because the Google Drive is available, will be available until I decide to delete it, which I haven't chosen to delete it yet. So the way you could save something, if you have Google Chrome, you could simply go to that little star in your URL window. So, right, do you see my Chrome?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great. So the really easy way is when there's an address, a web address that you want to save, there's a little star. Do you see that?
Yeah.
All right, just press that star and a bookmark added will come up. You can customize the name and you can choose the location with this drop down. And I have a bunch of different folders over here for my bookmarks. but if you click on the bookmark bar, it's going to save it right here. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so you could just save this, like this class's link, and you'll be able to navigate to the other class's links.
Through this link?
Mm-hmm. You should be able to.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then one more question going back to think good and it will be good. Could you show me again how you cut off, like, or even like what we did today with the, you know, Baruch Hashem and all that? How did you cut, like, you know, that it should be like on different, on, you know, like originally think good, it will be good was on one line. How did you cut it that it should be on the next, you know what I'm saying, line?
Right. I used, when you press enter on your keyboard, it moves words down to another line. So let's give an example on my Google Docs over here. And then I'm going to put my cursor in between two words. And then when I press enter on my keyboard, you'll find enter all the way on the right.
Right.
Press enter.
I see. Okay. That's what it is. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay.
Sure. Okay. Well, I guess we will be seeing you guys for a while. So yeah, have a happy Hanukkah. And if you have any questions, you can email me, zevblock@gmail.com. If you want to type it in the chat, feel free to email me. Maybe you have something you're working on and you want my feedback. You can feel free to email that to me as well. I'll give you your feedback. I think that would be really cool. And yeah, have a good Hanukkah.